Hey, what's up? It's Chris with the Great Party. So today I'm going to talk about the other side of like what happens if you make an intention that's like, oh, I'm going to resist the urge to just compulsively entertain myself on the internet. And when you do that, you quickly find out that, hey, there was like a reason why I was doing this. There's a reason why I was entertaining myself. And that's because like reality sometimes sucks. Whether that's like a career that you're in or relationships being sort of difficult. We're with my like mummer string band. We're doing our last preparations for the New Year's parade, and I was talking to one of the guys yesterday who like drives like a dump truck basically, and he just does his job, just driving down the street and just like has like Netflix open on his phone and just watches it, the whole time while he's working. So that's one way. I don't know if he really dislikes his job, or I probably would, if I had that job, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's one way to sort of deal with like an uncomfortable reality is just like completely, just not even like plugging into it. But it's not always a situational thing, and I'll get into what no one's really talking about, or not enough people are really talking about, which is that we're in a certain time where we're like in between two eras. Like we're at the end of one era. There's some new era coming. We have no idea what that's going to be. I have some sort of theories I can get into, but just for example, just think about this. Like I was born in the mid 80s, and over the last like almost 40 years now, just think about how our conception of like billionaires has changed over those years. So when I was growing up, being a billionaire was something that you basically aspire to. It was it was something that you would look up to that person and be like, man, what if I could get lucky, or what if I could work to like get to the position where I have that much money. But think about how people talk about billionaires now, like in the Western world. Like it's almost like a pejorative. Like like the person's sort of either like a bad person inherently for having that much money, or you just sort of put their life under a microscope and say, oh, like how is that person living? And if you're a billionaire and you're not living in this sort of like super moralistic way, then you get criticized. So that's just one example. I promised you my theory about what's changing about this era, and that's that uh, I think that humanity is sort of realizing that the idea of like imposing your will on somebody else or a group of other people is just not a long term sustainable strategy to get what you want, because it basically almost like schedules like a counter reaction at some point. Like use whatever sort of tools, physical, military, whatever, to impose your will on somebody else, and then a few years later you're going to get the inevitable result. And that's also in relationships too. Like if you're in a long-term relationship, sometimes your goals don't necessarily match up, or just certain like short-term decisions. And if you use whatever strategy to just silence the other person and just sort of like pick what you want to do, you can basically guarantee that it's going to create a problem long term. So you might as well take the time up front to resolve it. That's the way that I personally learned that, but you can definitely look at a lot of like current events and recent history, and look at it through that lens. Like looking at not so recent history, like slavery in the United States. We have this sort of system of going back to the 18th century, 19th century. You had the Atlantic slave trade, and then you had a group of like African descendants that were enslaved. Then you free them, but that creates, like what happens if you have a bunch of like new people that are citizens, and they're probably not very happy. Uh, like how do you manage that? And a lot of that was about like control and power, and we've sort of just we've realized it's not sustainable. You just can't do it. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that you can just go around just imposing your will on people, and that that's that's going to turn out good for you. That's just my theory. A lot of other people will talk about like theories around climate, and that's how like the era is going to change. You know, I read a recent theory that it's just, you know, our economic system is built off of infinite growth, and that infinite growth is another kind of fantasy. So we're having to recreate a new sort of system. But, you know, being human, we can't really predict what it is, like what's going to change. Like, I don't know. I have theories, other people have theories. They're all wrong in a certain way, and we'll only be able to make sense of it once the dust sort of settles and we can look back on it and sort of write a collective story about what happened. But in the meantime, it's just gonna feel pretty uncomfortable to be alive. And I'm gonna link a really interesting quote about that Herman Hesse had in one of his novels that sort of shows what I'm talking about. But you have the choice. You know, you can decide to just escape and entertain yourself on the internet. That's fine. You know, but I would suggest that instead you lean on other people and reach out to other people, because we're all going through the same thing in a certain way. I would suggest that you try to make those connections. And you know, the caveat there is that it's not always easy, and there's a reason why people prefer to just like sit in their house and be entertained, or look on their phone and be entertained. It's because people are tough. At the practice I had yesterday, I went into the with the intention of like making connections with these guys and talking to them. But sometimes people have all their walls up, or you know, some people you just don't really relate with as well. But I think it's worth that effort. We can kind of help each other get through this together. That's about it for me. As always, keep it gray, and yeah, lean on other people. Don't just sit on the internet all the time. Peace.